Well, we are near the end. Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning, which came out in 2022. I finally got to see this film. Originally, it was called Dead Reckoning Part 1 because they were going to do Part 1 and then Dead Reckoning Part 2 was going to be the second part of the story, like the second half of this big sort of giant finale or possible finale for the Mission Impossible series. But later, Dead Reckoning Part 2 was changed and renamed into Final Reckoning, and Dead Reckoning Part 1 just became Dead Reckoning. So this continues the Tom Cruise, Chris McQuarrie, team up that they've worked together for several Mission Impossible movies, have really shaped the franchise and have really molded it into being, kind of what it is now, high octane, very fast paced, kind of a mixture of just Indiana Jones and James Bond on steroids. You've got the spy stuff, you've got the big stunts, and they seem to get bigger and bigger with each subsequent film. So this movie, the journey takes Ethan around the world battling against this AI called the Entity, who essentially is able to predict movements of different people before they do it. And as a result of that, he has to find these two keys. And the whole film is around him trying to find these two keys. He ends up reuniting once again with his familiar team, Luther and Benji. They're back. Also, Ilsa is back. And they have a new quest to go upon now. As always, Ethan is doing things not by the book, even though they want him to do things by the book. This film introduces Haley Atwell. That's right, Miss Peggy Carter herself becomes the second main character here and the sidekick, and sort of Ethan's new, I guess, female co-protagonist, you can say, or female sidekick. And she's pretty awesome in this. I mean, she's great. Now, along the way, they end up meeting a slew of new characters, including a character that is built up as being someone who Ethan has known even before he became an IMF agent, and that's Gabriel Martinelli. And he's played by Esai Morales. This character is the main antagonist who also wants the keys and access to the AI, the Entity. You could say the Entity is the lead villain, but in reality, I would feel it's more so this character because there's history here. And in case you forgot, Esai Morales is the same guy. Like, it's kind of wild that I see him in this. Same guy who played Roberto in La Bamba all those years ago. Now he's the villain of a Mission Impossible movie. I really like him. I think that he's got, a real sense of badassery to him. I'm not sure if I would put him as badass as like the Henry Cavill character, but I think I would place him maybe on equal footing with Philip Seymour Hoffman, which says a lot because if you've been watching my reviews on the Mission Impossible films, you know how much I loved that Philip Seymour Hoffman character from Mission Impossible 3. Well, we have somebody here who I think is pretty damn close to it because of the incredible performance and the way he's built up. Now, when it comes to the stunts in this film, there's, once again, man, Tom Cruise is completely out of his mind. This movie was apparently shot back to back with The Final Reckoning. It was all one big shoot. And they did end up going back and doing reshoots later on because this movie was not very successful at the box office. It was underwhelming compared to what they thought they were going to make on it. So they wound up doing some reshoots. I'm not sure what they changed. I couldn't tell you. But this film in and of itself was quite expensive, and the stunts are a big reason for it. There's a big car chase sequence in the film early on. This is where Cruise meets Otwell's character, and they're kind of together trying to, get away from, they're trying to get away from, of all people, Mantis. The Pom Kier, I can never pronounce her name, man. Pom Clementieff. That's her name, right? Same person that plays Mantis in the MCU for the Guardians. She's like this blonde haired, like French assassin who can operate different types of vehicles. She's almost like a Terminator. Like the way that she's kind of a silent, like antagonist, like a tough enforcer type character, really makes me think about like Robert Patrick's T-1000 or even the Terminatrix in Terminator 3. Like she's got that real serious, like I'm going to kill you no matter what drive. And she's very, very focused on taking out the heroes. But I'll tell you what happens to her at the end of the movie and where she ends up, that's certainly something that I was not expecting when I was watching the film and first was introduced to the character. So you've got that big, sequence with the cars, and then near the end, you've got this incredibly insane sequence where Tom Cruise has to get on a motorcycle and chase down a train. So they're going back to using a train, like from the first Mission Impossible, going all the way back to the De Palma film. And so he has to like ride on a motorcycle and then fly off a mountain and then parachute down onto the train. And then he has to fight on the train and avoid not getting pancaked by the tunnels when the train goes into them. This sequence is, I don't know if I would put it up there with giving me as much anxiety as some of the underwater sequences were, but I do regret not seeing this in IMAX because I can only imagine with these big, wide, large, like these huge landscapes, these giant sets. It, to me, that's worth seeing in a movie theater when you have something large and grand like that. And apparently, once again, a lot of this stuff was done by Cruise himself because Cruise is a madman when it comes to these films. Every time that he and the creative team put together one of these crazy sequences, I just sit back and I wonder, dude, you're getting older now. Like, there are ways to do this safer, but no, like the film is mostly absent of CGI because a lot of the stuff they do, there is CGI there. I mean, there is objectively, especially the part where the train sort of falls apart. There is CGI elements there, but there are real dangerous stunts also there. Like there's actually stuff that if it goes wrong, Tom Cruise will end up in a cemetery, and he's still voluntarily doing it himself in many of these instances. So, I mean, dude, in the trailers for Final Reckoning, he's on an aircraft carrier again, doing something nutty there. So this dude is a different breed, I really like seeing Vanessa Kirby in this movie. She's basically the black market dealer who is trying to trade off the key, and apparently she's the daughter of Max from the first movie. So they tie things all the way back to that, which means that we're near the end. And I do want to comment on the end. So it was stated, or at least hinted about, that these last two Mission Impossible films, Dead Reckoning 1 and 2, which is now Final Reckoning, were going to be the end of the Ethan Hunt films. That finally, with Final Reckoning, it's over and that's it. Like, no more Mission Impossible movies, at least not with him as the lead. Tom Cruise is the lead, maybe as a producer, but not with him as the lead. However, there were other interviews where he came out and he said he could do these movies forever. So there may be a 9th and 10th Mission Impossible film coming up down the road. I think it's going to depend on how well Final Reckoning does, which I think it will do well, because I think a lot of casual moviegoers are under the belief that this is the end of the Ethan Hunt story, and I think they want to be there for it. But if the movie does well, they may do more. And this guy ain't getting any younger, man, but I do have respect for Tom Cruise as an actor for how much care he put into this franchise, and it's really paid off for him. You know, to me, I really like this film. I will say the characters in this movie, I think, were not as interesting as some of the ones from Rogue Nation or Fallout, but the movie as a whole worked for me. Like I had heard that from people saying it wasn't all that great, and they were saying it was maybe a step down, maybe because it doesn't finish the story because there's another part coming up, but you had to have known that. It's like Empire Strikes Back. Like this movie does have somewhat of a cliffhanger. Like you're not going to get all the plots resolved. You should know that, even though the fact that the movie was called Part 1 originally, like that's a dumb criticism. But there were others that just said it was a step down. And maybe when it comes to characters, like the Jeremy Renner character didn't come back in this one, and I thought he would. But I get it. Like, okay, maybe it's missing that a little bit. But I do love Haley Atwell's character. I really, really like Esai Morales as Gabriel. I like that. So they've got the sidekick and the villain right. So to me, that's kind of all you really need, I guess, in a way. I know there are some team members that were in previous movies that maybe would have been great in this one, but nevertheless, I really still enjoyed this movie. I liked it a lot more than I thought I was going to. It's quite long. It's 2.5 hours, but it doesn't bore. It doesn't really waste time. Even the talking sequences are pretty interesting, and the pacing is just out of this world. Like, it shocks me as to how Chris McQuarrie is able to pace these movies the way that he does, because he's done it now for like 4 movies in a row, right? And the movies still feel coherent, and they don't feel like an uncontrolled frenzy. And that's difficult to do, man. That's probably all done in the editing room. So yeah, thumbs up for Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. Final Reckoning is next. Look forward to that review and many more in the future.